everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is where I talk about grad school from an IO and a counseling perspective. Today I'm going to be focusing on counseling again because somebody asked me if I can talk about kind of like an intro to being a counseling student and also switching careers into counseling. So this video is going to be specifically about that. So first I'll start off with what is clinical mental health counseling. So clinical mental health counseling is basically the practice of assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of mental health issues and of like adjustment issues. So basically, therapy work. When you think of therapy, this is what we do. But there's also different things that clinical mental health counselors can do. Some of them are consultants for organizations. Some of them are hired as mediators. Some people work in policy. So there's so many different things that you can do with the counseling profession, but most of it involves obviously mental health care. And we can talk about licensure. First, though, we'll talk about kind of the steps into becoming a licensed counselor. Now, this is going to depend on your state. So the first step, if you're thinking of transitioning into being a counselor, is you need to think about what are the state the health department requirements in your state for counselors, and what is the licensure? Like, what are the licensure requirements? And after that, once you know that, then it'll determine where you're going to go to school. So looking for schools that align with your Department of Health's requirements for becoming licensed. One of the biggest things that most states require is going to a CACREP accredited school. And that is kind of like the golden standard for the counseling education requirements in the country. So it's kind of the same thing as the APA requirements for clinical counseling for PsyD and PhD students. It's similar to that, but it's for counseling students. So what you need to do is find programs that are CACREP accredited. If they're not CACREP accredited, then you have to figure out what are your state's requirements for people who graduate from programs that are not accredited, because there are things that you can do to still become licensed, but you need to know what those things are in advance. So I know in my state, if you graduate from a school that's not CACREP accredited, you have to give them like your whole transcript and like descriptions of each class that you took so that they can weigh that against what the requirements are for licensure in the state. And then I think you might have to do more clinical hours. I'm not really sure about that one. But I know that there's more things, more paperwork that you have to do. So it's easiest for you if you just go to a CACREP accredited school to begin with, and then you're covered on that base. Then your state's gonna know that you received the highest kind of level of education for counseling, or the highest standards. So then also the next thing that you do once you apply and you are accepted into a counseling program, the first year is probably going to be very foundational for you. I know my first year I took lifespan development, which when I first took it, I was kind of like, I took this in undergrad, why do I have to take it again? But it was a really interesting class because even though I took it in undergrad kind of taught me lifespan development from a biological standpoint, didn't focus too much on the mental health aspect. So this course focused on not only the biological aspect of growing and growing and maturing, but also the mental health aspect of it and like the different developmental stages, which I also went through in undergrad, but it was just more in depth in graduate school. Then you also take an ethics course, legal and ethics course. You also take a history systems course, like of history of counseling, things like that, multiculturalism. And that course, I thought, most people probably think, oh, multiculturalism is talking about race, gender, sexual orientation, those types of things. But it actually goes much more in depth and teaches you about the different kinds of subcultures that we glance over, don't even really think about, and how they affect us. It encourages us and challenges us to reflect on our own on our own culture and how that influences how we see the world and how we view other people. So after you take those foundational courses, that lasts about like a year, and you go into the more interesting courses. I call them more interesting because it's the whole reason that we go into the counseling field. You finally start to learn about diagnosis, you finally start to learn about treatment planning, and you have case studies, and you get to learn about group therapy and how to do group work and things like that. So it's more challenging, it's more work, but it's also, to me, more engaging, more interesting, because it's like the meat and potatoes of why you get into this field. Um, that's second year. Third year, well, and also it depends on what school you go to. This is just how my school laid it out. So third year is field work. Um, I'm in field work right now. I'm in my second semester. My school operates on 3 semesters, so we're year round. So this is my second semester. And so I had practicum last semester. This semester I have internship, and I'll have internship for the rest of the year. And I'm doing it at the same site that I did my practicum. So basically, the only difference is really just the amount of hours that you're accumulating. So this again depends on your state. My program is online, so they have a standard for how many hours you are supposed to get in your third year of clinical counseling practice. But your state may require you to have more. And my program has a class, an extension course, where you can, if you have to have more hours, you can take an extension course to accumulate more hours. So you have to be aware of that as well. What are your state's requirements? Mine requires 700 hours, and my program is lined up to help me get 700 hours in counseling before graduation. So, but some states I know require 1,000, so I would need 300 more, so I would have to take that extension course. So it's important for you to know that before we had to learn that stuff year one. I learned it before year one because I wanted to make sure that I was getting into a program that was going to comply with my state standards, especially since the ground campus for my school is not in my state. I was especially wanting to know what are the differences. So basically, after you graduate, or not after you graduate, while you're still in school, you should take a licensure exam. There is the NCE, and then there's the NCMHCE. And the NCE is a multiple choice test that you can take, and it's basically comprehensive, asks you questions about the different theories, the different the different counseling professions, like career counseling, asks you questions about that, diagnosis, it's comprehensive, everything you've learned, basically. Not everything you've learned, but it takes things from different parts of what you've learned. And then there's the NCMHCE, and that is more, it gives you a case study. It gives you 7, I think, case studies, and then you have to do a case conceptualization, a treatment plan, diagnosis, treatment plan, and then discuss like legal and ethical considerations for that client. I chose to take the NCMHCE because I think my brain operates better that way, to be able to break things down into segments. And I also liked the fact that it correlates with what exactly we're doing as counselors every day, whereas I don't really like multiple choice exams. So that's just why it's personal preference, but also you have to think about which exam your state takes, because my state accepts both exams to become licensed, but some states may only accept one or the other. So you really need to know before you spend, I think it's $230 to register for the test. You need to know which test you need to take. So that's also something that you need to consider. What is it like to be a student? It's kind of it's engaging, it's challenging, it pushes you really to step outside of your comfort zone when you're a counseling student, because you learn different things about yourself. Not only do you learn about how other people think and operate, but you learn about how you think and operate, which is important for a counselor because we have our own biases, our own experiences, and we come from our own cultural groups, and we bring all of those things into the counseling room. And so one of the things that a counseling program teaches you to do is how to leave those things at the door so that you can be completely present with whoever is sitting in front of you, and be as unbiased as you can. And then when you are becoming biased, it helps you to recognize when that happens and why it happened, what was the trigger, and what to do about it when it happens. So that's why I like the counseling field. Basically, well, that's why I like being a counseling student. It just definitely stretches you as an individual person, not just a professional, and it's not just learning about something. It's really about stretching yourself and growing yourself as well. Um, One thing that I like about counseling, as a student in fieldwork right now, I'm learning a lot about different things that I can do to help my clients. So the great thing about our field is that we're constantly learning, and we're constantly adapting, and we're constantly being able to apply these different creative interventions for our specific clients' needs. So just in this last semester alone, I've learned sign language. I've learned I've learned about PTSD nightmares, different interventions for mindfulness, and I've learned about bibliotherapy. So just in this one semester alone, I've learned of those four, at least those four things, and probably more than that, of how to apply that. And I had to learn those things outside of my regular course curriculum because I needed to know how to do that for clients. I needed to know how to apply that for clients. I had to do the research. And being able to see that applied to them and see the results of that extra effort really helps. So what the counseling program does for you is it really teaches you how to research and how to implement interventions, and then how to do it in a therapeutic way, and how to measure effectiveness. It doesn't teach you every single thing you need to know, but it teaches you how to get to those things. Like it didn't teach me sign language, but I had to go learn that for a client. It didn't teach me about all of the different PTSD um, uh, interventions that I could use on a client who's having PTSD nightmares, but it taught me about PTSD, and it taught me enough to where I could go out and research more and then be able to implement different interventions for that client. So I hope that helped and gave you some insight into what it's like to be a clinical mental health counseling student, and what are some considerations that you need to take, and if you would like to change your career, or if you're just interested in the counseling program and you are profession and you want to get into it. So thanks for listening, and leave a comment and questions below.